Now take a look at Perek Chavav Pasuk Yud Gimel. Now this is not the plain meaning, by far from the plain meaning, but it has a lot of meaning in our day-to-day living. So the guy says like this: Ve'amarta lifnei Hashem Elokecha. 3 lines from the top. This is the guy who's making his declaration about the Bikurim. Ve'amarta lifnei Hashem Elokecha. Biarti HaKodesh min habayis. I have removed the holy things, the tithes that have accumulated. I've removed them from the house. This is what's called vidui maestros. This is a guy, when you have to tithe, that at the end of 3 years, you have to get all the tithes that have accumulated, that you may have kept in your silo, you have to bring them to Yerushalayim. V'gam nasativ l'levi, I've given to the Levi, v'lager, to the convert. Often the Torah puts the convert in the category of people who are impoverished, because often the convert has left his family, does not have an infrastructure of support. Doesn't mean that he has to be poor. If Bill Gates were to convert, we would welcome him with open arms. I would make him my chavrusa without a problem. But in general, the convert leaves, and the convert is poor. The convert's family may have cut him off. They don't approve of his choices. La yosam v'lo almanak. Now, pay attention. Look at the next line carefully. Kechol mitzvoscha asher tzivisani, like all your mitzvahs which you have commanded me. Lo avarti mimitzvosecha. I did not bypass your mitzvahs. How does the article translate it? I have not transgressed. Okay. I have not bypassed it. V'lo shachachni, and I have not forgotten. So the commentaries point out over here that the plain meaning is, listen, I've done them. This is a declaration we made. I've done your mitzvahs. I haven't forgotten it. I haven't forgotten any details. I've done it all. But one of the commentaries points out, tongue-in-cheek, that you sometimes find what I would like to call, and I've mentioned in the past, a religious Mr. Magoo. Now, I don't know if you remember Mr. Magoo? Oh, yeah. Yeah, Mr. Magoo is this blind guy. He can barely see. And wherever he goes, he leaves a trail of disaster. I think Jim Backus was the voice for Mr. Magoo. Jim Backus played Thurston Howell in Gilligan's Island. I think he was the voice for Mr. Magoo. Mr. Magoo is this character who is always this little. It used to be a cartoon, and he goes around, and whatever he does, he leaves a trail of disaster behind him. And whatever he's doing, he leaves a trail of disaster. I always talk about it. I'm on film, so I got to be careful. I call it women drivers. They're driving along, and everybody's racking up behind them. Okay, that's my own personal, which is true. So Jim is a Mr. Magoo. Now there are people that I call a religious Mr. Magoo, and it's not fun to get caught in their path, because this is a guy who, in his headlong rush to fulfill a mitzvah, the guy leaves a trail of bodies behind him. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter once said, when you're running to do a mitzvah, just don't destroy the entire world on the way. You're so focused on doing your mitzvah that everybody, the bowling pins fall as the bowling ball comes through. So, for example, you want to kiss the Torah in shul. Right? You want to get they're bringing the Torah back, right? You're almost like being in a hockey game. It's like, boom, help, excuse me, that was my head just, And so there are a lot of things like that where you're in such a urgency to fulfill the mitzvah, you've taken your eyes off what the priority is. The classic example is when you're doing a mitzvah, you have to remember why you're doing the mitzvah. You're doing the mitzvah not because of the mitzvah. You're doing the mitzvah because God said to fulfill the mitzvah. So you have Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky once had a man in his community who the man was told by the doctor not to fast on Yom Kippur. Here we have Yom Kippur is coming up. Man was told by the doctor not to fast on Yom Kippur. The man disobeyed the doctor, and he died. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky would not eulogize him. Would not eulogize the man. He felt that this man is borderline suicide. Because why didn't you listen to the doctor? Yom Kippur! You gotta fast! Why are you fasting? Why are you fasting? What do you mean why are you fasting? You have to fast it. Why do you have to fast on Yom Kippur? Only one reason. Only one reason. Why? Because God said fast. Well, the same God who said fast says not to fast when your life is in danger. So you're serving yourself or you're serving God. What are you really doing? That's lo avarti mi mitzvah. V'lo shachati. I didn't forget why I'm doing the mitzvah. Sometimes you get a guy who's probably the classic example is a guy who wants to daven for the Amud. There's a tradition. If somebody dies, so their son, if they have a son, he davens for the Amud. He's the chazan during the year of mourning. So you'll often have people going up there. 1 second, I got a yard site. Well, I got yard site. Well, get out of the way. I'm davening for the Amud. I got yard site. So they're fighting over the yard site. Why do you want to daven for the Amud? Because it's good for my father's neshama. Yeah. What do you think is better for your father's neshama? To daven for the Amud, or to allow another Jew to do it in order to, remember, you're not sacrificing a mitzvah over here. It's not a mitzvah. If you have one lulav and one esrog, you have to do the mitzvah. You can't give it to another Jew, just like you wouldn't give him $20. We're talking about a custom over here. What do you think is more important, the customer being kind to another Jew and avoiding a fight in shul? Then again, if there's not going to be fights in shul, why go? Right? But what do you think? What do you think is more important? To avoid say Rabbi Yisrael Salanter was once, it happened to him, and he backed off of he was going to daven for the Amud, and some other guy wanted to daven for the Amud. So Yisrael Salanter backed off. So somebody said to him, yeah, but you have your father. He says, I'm trying to elevate my father's soul. The greatest elevation for my father's soul is that he should have left the son who's willing to let somebody else do it. That's the greatest elevation. The Ger Rebbe, one of the Ger Rebbes, saw that one of his Hasidim was upset. He was davening in shul. He saw that one of his Hasidim was upset. So he comes over to his Hasid. He says, why are you upset? I forgot my gartel. Now, the gartel is the Hasidim wear that black thing that they wear around them. So a very, very nice custom. Hasidim wear that, people with Hasidim. He said, I forgot my gartel. So the Ger Rebbe says, here, take mine. He starts taking off his gartel. So the Chazal said, but Rebbe, what are you going to do? He says, listen, you'll fulfill the custom of wearing a gartel, and I will fulfill the Torah command of doing a chesed with my fellow Jew. How's that? Right? And that's the whole story right there. That's the whole story. Stay focused on what we're trying to do over here. What are you trying to do over here? What is the goal? And therefore, it says, Lo avarti means, and this is, I can't tell you how many things I've seen in life. I had a guy once here who told me that he was staying at somebody's house for Shabbos. And he wakes up 5 o'clock Shabbos morning. He wakes up and he has to go to the bathroom. He's a guest at somebody's house. Wakes up 5 o'clock Shabbos morning. The door, tries to open his door. The door is locked from the outside. So the guy's pulling on the door. He's got to go to the bathroom, pulling on the door. Now he starts knocking quietly, 5 o'clock in the morning. Nothing. Gornish, nothing. Wife waits, 5:30, 6 o'clock. He's standing there. 7 o'clock, he's standing there. He's break. 8 o'clock, all of a sudden, hears click, door's unlocked. Okay, runs to the bathroom. What happened? He was staying by a couple. And the husband wanted to go daven at the Nates Minyan. But if the husband leaves to go daven to the Nates Minyan, then he got a problem of yichud. He got a couple who's alone in the house. His wife is alone with this other guy in the house. So he did the logical thing. He incarcerated him in his room, right? He locked him in the room for 3 hours. That's the logical solution to it, right? The answer is no, that's not the logical. So the logical solution is either invite the guests or daven Nates. And if you can't daven Nates because you got a guest, so that's your mitzvah. Your mitzvah to take care of your guests, not to incarcerate him so you can go to shul and be a tzaddik. And I could just see the guy davening. They should have one of these split-screen cartoons where the guy's in shul davening with his devotions, and you got this guy standing at the door like this. You know, you can just imagine. Well, Far Side would have a party with that. You know, the idea to get your priorities right. Get your priorities right. This is lo shachachli. Okay, now let's go on. Let's go on because there are a couple more key points over here. Take a look at Pasuk Perek Chav Zayin. We're going all the way to chapter 27 now. Chapter 27, verse 7. I know another guy who there's a tradition. I know these guys personally. I'm special. There's a tradition that on Yom Kippur, some people stay up all night in shul on Yom Kippur. Now, the halacha says clearly if you're going to be tired the next day and you won't be able to daven and it's going to threaten your fasting, then you don't do it. So. But there's a tradition. Some people stay up all night. Okay, so there's this guy. His wife was in her 9th month of pregnancy. That's when it ends, by the way. And she was in her 9th month of pregnancy. And this guy decided he's going to stay up all night on Yom Kippur in shul. So he borrowed the key from the Gabbai, and he locked himself in so that he could engage. And his wife said, please don't. I may need you. I might go into labor. Don't worry. It'll be besimcha. Everything will be okay. Just ten chiyuch, just smile, be besimcha, don't worry Hashem, trust Hashem. Okay, so he goes to the shul, and of course in the middle of the night his wife goes into labor. She sends down the 9-year-old son. He's knocking on the shul door is locked from the inside. Father is in a very devoted, deep sleep in the shul, so he didn't hear his son. They had to call Hatzalah, get her to the hospital, and they were Hashem. And it turned out well, just like the father said, right? They had a baby boy, and everybody lived happily ever after, right? You understand the distortion of priorities over here. You understand what a distortion of priorities that is. Why do you abandon your wife in her 9th month on Yom Kippur? On Yom Kippur, more women go into labor. Statistically, first of all, women have to fast on Yom Kippur. If it's a healthy pregnancy, women have to fast. because even if she's in her 6 months, a woman is having trouble in pregnancy, so then they're different because fasting actually could bring on contractions. And the delivery rooms are actually overfilled on at the end of Yom Kippur. There are a lot of women who have gone into labor on Yom Kippur. So Yom Kippur is in their 9th month. So a woman on Yom Kippur anyway is more vulnerable. Plus, you may have to rest. You may need somebody to help take care of the kids because she's tired, she's fasting, and she's got a nurse. If she's a nursing mother, she's fasting on Yom Kippur. It's horrible because she's got to nurse the baby. It's drawing fluid out of her system. It's a very, very, very. But okay, so you have to do it unless there's a medical purpose, a medical reason. Doctor says not to. Then you're not allowed to do it. So a person has to keep focused on what's the goal over here. They had a very old man, a very old Hasidic Rebbe, who the doctors examined him, and the doctor determined that he can't fast on Yom Kippur. So he came to the kids. He said, listen, I got some distressing news for you. Your father can't fast on Yom Kippur. So he goes, oh, Gewalt. Okay, Reuven, tell Dad he can't fast. I ain't telling him. Shimon, you tell him. He says, no, let Levi do it. So the brother says, okay, let's go in together. So they come in, they say, Dad, we just have to tell you, Tati, we spoke to the doctor. The doctor, unfortunately, he said you're not going to be able to fast on Yom Kippur. So he smiled and said, oh, Baruch Hashem. So they're looking at it, so what are you so happy about? He says, look, for the last 60 years, I've served Hashem by fasting on Yom Kippur. Hashem wants me to eat, so now I'll serve Hashem by eating on Yom Kippur. What do I care how I serve Hashem? Kodesh Baruch Hu decides how I serve. That's what the attitude should be. That's the correct attitude. What's the difference to you? The classic example on Rosh Hashanah, just imagine, this has happened, by the way. You got a husband, you've seen what's like in the yeshiva. You start slichos and Elul, and everybody's focused, and you come to Rosh Hashanah, and Aseres Yemei Tshuva, and then on Yom Kippur morning, the husband gets up, he's got the white kittel on with the talis, and he's heading out the door, and the wife says to him, Shlomi, I'm running a fever, I think I need you to stay home with the kids. This guy's devastated. I know, guys. I've been there. I know what that's like. I'm going to daven. I'm going to be an angel. I'm going to be a malach. I'm going to, and all of a sudden your wife is telling you, no, you're going to stay home and you're going to change diapers, break up fights, and make corn patties for the kids. Yom Kippur, that's what I'm going to do. And what's the answer? The answer is, you just said Hashem Melech, right? The whole time, Hashem Melech, Hashem Molech, Hashem Yimloch. God's the king. God's the king. If God's the king, how do you serve a king? You don't serve a king the way you want to serve the king. You serve the king the way the king wants you. Are you a loyal servant or you're not a loyal servant? So if you're a loyal servant and the king says, you, Zach, are staying home breaking up fights with 4-year-olds, great, that's what the king wants. What do I care how the king wants me to serve him? Except for my personal interest, where it's much easier to go to Yom Kippur. It's much easier to go to shul and fast. It's much easier to fight ISIS than it is to stay home and with 4-year-old kids. That's my own personal preference, right? But we're not talking about. We're talking about doing what the king wants. So what do you care? If that's what the king wants you to do. That becomes your mitzvah right now. What do you care? That's the idea. Okay, so you take a look at pasuk Perek Chav Zayin, pasuk Zayin. Here the Torah talks about. You learned on Shabbos. If you're following up, how they're going to go up onto the two mountains, Har Grizim and Har Eval, and they're going to make these declarations of the various curses and the various blessings. So then in Pasuk 27, it says like this, V'zavachta Shlomim, on page 1072, it's about 9 lines from the bottom of the page. V'zavachta Shlomim, you will sacrifice offerings, V'chalta Sham, and you will rejoice, V'samachta lifnei Hashem Elokecha, you will rejoice before Hashem your God. Now, and then the Torah goes on and goes into this whole, right after that, there's going to be all the various curses. Curses the man who does this, curses the man, various calamities, and so on and so forth. So before anything, the Torah wants to communicate the idea to us that we believe in the attitude of all for the best. We believe there's an attitude of all for the best. Whatever happens is for the best. And therefore, even if something is challenging in a person's life, that's because God has decided, in His wisdom, that this person may need the challenge in order to get him on the right track. Sometimes a person who things are going too well, there's a pasuk that says, Vayishman Yeshurun Vayivat. Yeshurun, which is the Jewish people, waxed fat. Yeshurun became wealthy. Vayivat, they then rebelled. Literally, Vayivat means they kicked. You rebel. When does a person rebel? So Gemara says, a lion roars when he's got a box full of meat, not when he's got a box full of straw. When does a lion roar? When you got a box full of meat. That's when you're much more confident, much more cocky, much more arrogant, and much more forgetful of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So if you're a wealthy man in your entire life you spend giving tzedakah and davening and thinking about a Kodesh Baruch Hu, it's one thing. But if you're a little focused, and sometimes a person says, hey, I'm going to do you a favor now. We need to rechannel you over here a little bit. We need you to go into the opposite direction. Then a Kodesh Baruch Hu sometimes may bring a little bit of suffering on a person. Now, none of us want it. Nobody wants the test of suffering. Everybody would rather the test of wealth than the test of poverty. But realize that the test of wealth is a more difficult test. A poor man almost naturally has greater, stronger faith. A person who's suffering has no choice. He turns to God. He always turns to God. A wealthy man is often thinking to himself, well, I had an angle here and I saw the market this way and I anticipated it. And he's got all his reasonings why he succeeded in life. That's very dangerous. Once in a while, Kodesh Baruch Hu needs to give him a little patch just to get you, just to rewind it to start, so that we can get you back on the right track. So the first thing we do is we bring these offerings. V'samachta lifnei Hashem. Rejoice with whatever happens in life. It's a difficult thing, by the way. It's a difficult thing. Don't, in the concept of gam zu l'tova. You ever heard the expression in Hebrew, gam zu l'tova? Gam zu l'tova means this too shall pass. This too shall, this too is for the best. Gam zu l'tova. What that means is like this. A person bends down to pick up his pen and he smacks his head on the table. His head hurts. If you say gam zu l'tova does not take away the pain. But it keeps the pain in the proper perspective that it wasn't wasted. At least there's a reason for it. When a dentist is giving you a shot of Novocaine, you say gam zu l'tova because you know that pain is because you don't want the pain of the drill. And then when he gives you the drill, and then you know this is for the best, right? Because then you'll be able to eat afterwards. And when he gives you the bill for the drill, right? This too is for the best because I have to pay the money in order to have my teeth working in order that I'm able to eat, and so on and so forth. But while it's happening, it doesn't hurt. It's just that it's a reminder to you that this is all for the best. There's a reason why HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing this for me. That's why it's important to keep that attitude. That's what the Torah is teaching. Okay. Now, take a look at Pasuk Tes. Back on page 72. Okay, here we have a very puzzling pasuk. Torah says like this, right by that big white space, about 7 lines from the bottom. Vaydaber Moshe v'hakohanim alavim al kol Yisrael lemor. Moshe, the Kohanim, the Levim, they speak to the Jewish people, they say the following. Haskes ushma Yisrael. How does the article translate Haskes? Be attentive, pay attention. Pay attention, ushma Yisrael, hayom hazet ni'isa la'om Hashem Elokecha. On this day you've become a nation to Hashem your God. What's the obvious question?
Wasn't it on Exodus?
What's that?
Wasn't that
Of course, they've been a nation for a long time. Why say on this day you've become a nation to Hashem your God? Take a look at Rashi. Hayom hazet ni'isa la'om. It's the right column of Rashi, last line. Last line on the right column of Rashi. B'chol yom yu beinecha ki'ilu hayom basa imo babris. Every day it should be as if you have gotten involved in the covenant. It should be every day as if today we have made our commitment to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What does that mean? Imagine it was your first day. Imagine it's your first day. Imagine it's your first. What's it like your first day in the office? You graduated college. You finally put on a 3-piece suit, and you're going down to the accounting firm or to the law office for the first day. Ever see somebody on the first day in the office? And you come walking in, this is what you've been working for, 4 years in college, and you finally got that job. You went to the interview wearing a tie for the first time. You had a haircut, you cut off all the, you scrubbed off all the tattoos. And you go in there and you're sitting across the counter from the guys, they hire you for the job. Wow, are you excited? Then you go home, you buy a new suit, another suit now. For your first day, you come into work, your first day, and then you take a look around the office, you see all these guys who look like they're just haggard. You expected everybody, like all these gum-snapping guys who are working, and each one has a cubbyhole, a cubicle over there, and they put you in your cubicle, and you're like, and your first day, you're just like, you're going to just change the world. That lasts for how long? That's about a week.
An hour.
About a week till they tell you to buy, maybe an hour till they tell you to bring some donuts. Hey, Dak, some donuts and coffee. Oh, yeah, I wouldn't mind some. No, that's not what we meant. We meant bring for everybody in the office. Okay, so you're bringing. So the first day you do it because you want to keep everybody happy. By the third day, you're tired of it. And it eventually, like anything else in life, it loses its freshness. It comes along and Hayom hazeh, on this day you've become a nation. On this day you become, thanks, Joel. On this day you've become a nation. Every day should be a fresh day. Now, this applies to Judaism in general, applies to Torah in particular. We've spoken about this. But one point here that is extremely important that the commentaries point out, what makes us a nation? What makes a Jew? What makes Italians a nation? What makes Italians a nation? They live in Italy. What makes the Greeks a nation? They live in Italy. What makes the Hungarians a nation? They live in Hungary. And they have all these people coming into Hungary, so they're going to be Hungarians now too, even though they're Muslims, right? Because now they got to take in all these foreigners are coming in. Okay, the Romans, the Germans, the Greeks, everybody's a nation. Why are we Jews? Why are we Jews? That's why Judaism is one of the most difficult things to define. Are we Israeli? Theoretically, if we want to stay parallel with Italians, Irish, Polish, and Greeks, we should be Israelites because we're from Israel. But we're not Israel, we're Jews. And a Jew is, we're not, it's both, it's an interesting creature because it's both a nationality and a religion. And it's often confused with Israel. So when somebody wants to get back at Israel, they attack Jews in Argentina. What's that got to do? They're Argentinian Jews, they have nothing to do with Israel. The answer is that it all kind of goes together because Jews don't have an identity. Let me ask you a question, gentlemen. Are you an American Jew or a Jewish American? No? Are you? You an American Jew or Jewish American? I'm an American Jew, not Jewish American. What am I first? Am I American or Jewish first? What do I consider myself? What's the priority by me? Am I American or am I Jewish? Right? I'm Jewish. I'm Jewish. I happen to be an American Jew. I'm not a Jewish American. I'm a Jewish American. He's an Irish American. He's a Polish American. What's second? That means I'm an American first. I'm not an American. I'm a Jew first. Well, in America, the noun comes second. The adjective comes first. I'm an American Jew. He's an Israeli Jew. He's an Iraqi Jew. We're all Jews. Jews are what we are. They don't like it on my boarding whenever I go to border control and they say nationality. On the thing, I just write Jew. I write Jewish. I write Jewish. One of the guys on one thing, he says, "You're not, sir. Are you American? Your passport. I'm American." I write Jewish. So because that's what I see myself. I'm Jewish. But what is it? What is Judaism? So the Torah is telling you right over here, Hayom hazeh niyesa la'am. You become a nation. 1 second, you haven't gotten into Israel yet. How'd you become a nation? Take the Italians out of Italy, take the Irish out of Ireland, and put them in the United States. What do fourth generation Irish consider themselves in America? I'm an American. I happen to live in Boston. I originally was Irish. I'm Ireland. I've never been to Ireland. No great love for Ireland. I don't know if I've been to. I'm an American. I am a Jew no matter where I go. Why is that? Because we don't become Jewish as a result of the land. The land happens to be the best place to practice Judaism. But I'm a Jew if I'm in Australia also. Why am I a Jew? I'm a Jew because of the Torah. Our nationality is Torah. Our nationality is not Israel. That's one of the objections, why there was such a strong objection in the Torah community to the movement of Zionism. Because Zionism put an emphasis on the land itself. The land, from our perspective, is not an ends. The land is a means to an ends. What is the ends? The ends is Torah and service of God. The means to the ends is anything that helps us achieve that. So if you live in a Jewish community, let's say in America, you have a choice. You have a choice to live in San Jose or to live in Flatbush. So you're better off living in Flatbush because you're going to be with a Jewish community with Shoals. So you make your choice based on what is best for your spiritual growth to be a Jew. Is it better for you to live in Israel? If it's better for you as a Jew to live in Israel, you should live in Israel. There are plenty of people it's not better. Believe it or not, gentlemen. Plenty of people it's not good for them to live in Israel. Because in Israel you won't find employment, which means you're going to have a very rough, bumpy marriage because you and your wife are going to be fighting over money all the time. You may not have parental support. If you have little children in the house, you don't have family here to help you raise your children. There are a lot of factors to take into it. You may not know the language. You may not be employable here. There's a lot of factors. If you could live here, you should live here. If you can't live here, like somebody once said, better to live in Chutz La'aretz and wish you were living in Israel than live in Israel and wish you never came. And therefore, if you come here single and you're learning in yeshiva, great, there's nothing else. But when you have to make a life decision, it's not just like, yeah, Israel, go Israel. Well, it depends. So if you're from France, you may have no choice. Time to get out of France. It's getting a little hot there. So if you're already going to leave France, you may as well go to Israel. But if you have a choice under certain circumstances, you're doing better in Chutz La'aretz. That's what you're supposed to do because the focus is on the person's growth, not on the land itself. Yeah.
But isn't it a mitzvah every second on your land in Israel?
It is. It's also a mitzvah that when you're married to stay married. And therefore, you could walk around in Israel and walk around in Israel very lonely. right? You walk around in Israel very lonely because your wife will leave you. And therefore, it is better to stay married and be in Chutz La'aretz, which is what my wife said to me when I asked her if I could get a motorcycle. She said, if you could get one, but you'll be lonely, right? So what if you get, which meant no. So I did not get the motorcycle. So that's a problem. That's a problem. I should never have asked. I should have just shown up with it. By the way, when I was in high school, I was 17 years old, and I didn't have a driver's license yet. My dad, one day, totally out of character, he bought a Kawasaki 100 motorcycle that somebody was selling cheap. And he put it in the living room. This was in winter. He put it in the living room, then we put it in the backyard, and I would ride it up and down the alley. And I was waiting to get my license, waiting till summer to go waiting till after winter to go get a motorcycle license. And between winter and spring, my mother, who graduated from nursing school, started working in Chicago Rehabilitation Institute, where she was working with 17-year-old paraplegics and quadriplegics. And I remember I came home from school one day, and guess what? The motorcycle be gone. Nobody checked with me. Nobody. What do you got? And that was the end of my motorcycle. I mean, I was kicking that baby up to about 12 miles an hour in the alley. So it was great. It was great, back and forth in the alley. But that was it. No motorcycle. So what do you call it? Yes, that's and now I don't have one, so I'm still married. Now, take a look at Perek Chav Zayin Pasuk Chav Dalet. Very interesting concept now. Very interesting concept. Perek Chav Zayin Pasuk Chav Dalet. Torah says like this. There's a whole list of people who are cursed. And then, on page 1074, it's about 7 lines from the bottom. It says, Oror make re'ehu basoser. Cursed is one who smites his fellow in secret. Ve'omar kol ha'om amen. Wow. So, accursed is one who, what pasuk does this correspond to? Or Makir 20:24. How does he translate it? Accursed is one who strikes his fellow stealthily. You mean if you do it out in the open, it's okay? It's just insane. It's just in secret. If you sneak a punch, what's it called? A cheap shot. Then you're cursed. But if you come right up for the front and give him a shot in front, that's okay. No, that's not what the Torah is talking about. So the Gemara says over here, what does this talk about? Took a bottom line of Rashi in the right column. Make re'eu basoser, says Rashi, al loshon hara hu omer. This is referring to loshon hara, speaking bad about people. Let's talk about speaking bad about people. Now, what does that mean? So the Chafetz Chaim, if you ever look in the book, the Sefer Chafetz Chaim, where the Chafetz Chaim, that's how he got his name, by the way. He wrote the Sefer Chafetz Chaim based on his name wasn't Chafetz Chaim. His name wasn't even Chaim. His name was Yisrael Meir. But he wrote the Sefer called Chafetz Chaim, based on the verse in the Torah that says, Miha isha Chafetz Chaim, who desires life. If you desire life, nitzor l'shoncha meira, stop your tongue from speaking bad, usosecha medaber mirma, speaking falsehood. So based on those words of the pasuk, that was the name of his Sefer, and because that was the Sefer, that's how he became the Chafetz Chaim. Okay, now, here the Torah says you're not allowed to smite somebody in secret, on the sly. Because when you speak Lashon Hara about people, what do you usually do? You don't walk over to somebody and badmouth him in front of a third person. What you usually does, like that. So that's what's called striking him in public, in private. Now you've all learned all the laws of Lashon Hara. I'm not going to go into the laws. I just want to point out one thing. When is it permissible to say something derogatory about somebody? The rule is if it is for a productive purpose, which cannot be achieved any other way, and you do not exaggerate at all. And you have no ulterior motivation. A shidduch, somebody calls me up about a guy in the yeshiva. Wants to know, is this a good guy for his daughter? What can you tell me about the guy? What would you like to know? Well, does he daven, everything else? Okay. Now, I happen to know that the guy has messy handwriting. Is that something that I should tell? What can you tell me about Chaim? Oh, he's got messy handwriting. Is that something I'm supposed to say or not? The answer is, if he would ask me about it, I would tell him. And then I'm obligated to tell him. How is his handwriting? Well, yeah, no, he writes. Right? Is it messy or good? Is it messy? Yes, very messy handwriting, because that's apparently important to him. So a guy says, what do you know about it? Now, I happen to know this guy rarely makes it to Minyan. And, well, he's a good guy, but he never makes it to minyan. There's no reason for me to say that. If the guy says to me, does he make it to minyan? Yes. Yes, he's on time. He's on time 90% of the time. He's always up by mincha, and he gets there to mincha. He gets to mincha on time, right? Now, if he asks me, does he go to Shachris? Yes, he goes to Shachris. I remember seeing him a couple of years ago. He was at Shachris, right? How often does he go? Well, I would say sometimes. So if the guy, the more direct, the more specific you are, the more. So I say, does he get there 70% of the time? So he doesn't mean, is he there for 70% of davening? He means, does he get there on time 70%? Then I have to answer the question. Now, there is a certain category in halacha where it is what's called, because a lot of these things are subjective. One guy doesn't care, another guy does care. And the reason you have to answer a pointed question is because if you try to push the shidduch, you try to whitewash it, you could actually be causing a disaster very easily. If a guy says to you, how often does your roommate get to Shachris? And you know he doesn't get that often. The guy says, does he get there more than 50% of the time? I know he doesn't. You have to give that answer. You know why? Because this guy's daughter may be a girl who wants a husband who's up at Shachris every morning. And then they're going to get married, and there's going to be strife because she's disappointed, because you who knew and should have said didn't say because you were such a tzaddik. So better off if they ask you. You don't have to volunteer it, but if you know the information and they're asking you, then you have to say the information. You don't have to say it in a, oh, he's a horrible, he hates davening. You know, you're allowed to smooth it over a little bit, but not to avoid the information. Now, there is a category of Lashon Hara, which is where something is objectively, anybody would say, this is objectively a problem. Let's say somebody has a life-threatening illness. They call you about the bachar, they call you about the way, and you know that he's got 6 months to live. And that's something that you would have to volunteer. You know that he did time in prison for violence. He was a violent criminal. That's something, I mean, a lot of times you have to check with halachic authority, but this is information that you would have to give over even if a shidduch has already been made. Sometimes you have to intervene and say, listen, I just want you to know your daughter's about to marry a guy who was married once before, and he was in prison for beating his wife. Now that's something that a future father-in-law would probably want to know. Therefore, you have to know. Now, the rule is that you're allowed to say it. And when you say it, it's not Lashon Hara. However, we are held to a very exacting standard. So let me give you an example. You've seen Shulchan Aruch. A lot of halachas in the book, right? How could I possibly keep all those halachas? The Shulchan Aruch is vast. I'm supposed to keep those halachas. I've been frum for 3 months. I'm supposed to keep all the halachas? The answer is no. God's reasonable. Keep as much as you can. You're not accountable for everything because you can't possibly do it. But, do you do those things you're able to do? No, that you don't do either. Then you become accountable for the whole thing. Because the reason you're not doing it is not because it's overwhelming. The reason you're not doing it is because you don't feel like doing any of it. You understand? Your accountability could shift based on what your attitude is. If my attitude is I'm trying to do as much as I can, my goodness, I'm overwhelmed. Good, so you're not accountable. You'll get there, you'll do that too. But if I'm not even doing the things I could and should be doing, so then the things that you're not doing, you're also accountable. Because if you were going to get there, you wouldn't do that either. Same thing when it comes to Lashon Hara. Why are you talking Lashon Hara? You're talking Lashon Hara because you really enjoy it? Oh, good. Make my day. Ask me something bad about him. I finally have a chance to unleash my tongue because this is necessary. Right? What's the proof why you're saying it right now? How are you the rest of the time? If the rest of the time you don't talk Lashon Hara, and now when you need to, you do, okay, then you're keeping the halachas the way you should. But if you're always talking Lashon Hara, and this just makes it more juicier, now I can do a mitzvah, then even then there's going to be a certain accountability. I don't know to what degree, there's going to be a certain accountability. Therefore, the Torah says, cursed is somebody who smites another person in private. That talking bad about somebody behind their back, that's what the Torah is talking about over here. Okay, take a look at Perek Chav Ches Pasuk Beis. A very interesting blessing that we're going to get. 1074, bottom of page 1074. I knew a case of a shidduch, where a guy calls up a certain yeshiva, and he says, can you tell me about Ruvain? He says, yeah, Ruvain, very top. Well, and he's right in the frum world, you're looking for a guy who's a good learner, and he's a guy, this, can you tell me about Ruvain? He talks to the Rosh Yeshiva. Yeah, how is he in learning? Very good learner. Very good. One at the top of this year. Very sharp. How about his device? Sits and learns all the time. How are his mitos? Good mitos. Everything good. Wonderful. Let me ask you a question. Is he honest? Is he honest? Is he a straight guy? Is he honest? Oh, yes. Hey, this is my daughter I'm talking about. Is the guy honest or he's not honest? He goes, it's not his strongest characteristic. I'm asking for a straight answer. Is this guy, would you call him honest or dishonest? So he just says, listen, what can I tell you? The guy, that's his one flaw. The guy is he's sneaky, he is cunning, he's not what I would call an ehrlicher guy. He's not. So Father says, great. My daughter is very, very sneaky, and this is not her song, and she needs a husband who's going to run circles around him. That's the boy that I want, right? And the couple got married. Now, imagine the Rosh Yeshiva trying to help Hashem and not willing to give the information, then the shidduch doesn't take place. The shidduch doesn't take place. Not only that, he's doing an injustice because now the girl's getting set up with the guy who's going to be dishonest. You'll find after you're married that certain times you're going to have to resort to all the cunning you can find, right, Mr. Fogel? Right? You're going to have to be as cunning. You're going to have to be as cunning as cunning as a snake. Okay, but are you inherently the third guy? Don't help HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Answer HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The guy asks the question, answer the question, let HaKadosh Baruch Hu run his world. It's not your job to force the shit up. That's not your job. Your job is to answer. Again, if you have any questions about it, go to the Rabbanim here. Somebody ever calls you up, guys, and that's one of the best person to talk to is a roommate. Whenever I check out shidduchim for guys and for my own children, I call the roommates. You can talk to the teacher, yeah, she's a wonderful girl, this is a wonderful girl, then you talk to the roommate. Yeah, she's a nice, I guess she's a nice girl. That's a lot different than the teacher. Because the roommate's got to live with her stuff on the floor, with her, with her having taken her brush and her comb and lying on her bed when she's not supposed and dripping water all over. So the roommate knows a little bit better. It ain't just the tone gives you an insight. The teacher's, sure, the teacher's here at her best. The roommate knows who the person is. So guys get asked all the time. I always try to talk to the roommates to find out what the guy does, what time they go to sleep, but all sorts of questions you got to know how to ask. But when you're asked, you have to know how to answer. Yeah.
Back to that Reuben situation. Now that the rabbi heard the father say, my daughter will be able to run circles, don't you think that's his, now he should try to stop the shidduch from him?
Not necessarily. Not only that, when I get asked about a boy, sometimes people call me up to ask about a boy in the yeshiva. So I'll say, is this, that, and the other? And once in a while I'll say, you want to tell me about the girl? Now sometimes people will say, well, tell me, yeah. No, they don't have to, because I didn't call them to find out about the girl. They called me for a reference. If I say, well, what about the girl? I didn't call you for that's not. Listen, if he's interested, he'll ask me. Is that necessarily a flaw that you have to tell somebody? I don't know that it's a flaw. It's a flaw. Nobody's perfect. Everybody's got their flaw. This guy's lazy, and this one's cunning, and this one. That's not what's considered a major. Unless she's robbed banks, that's something else.
I feel like the guy would
we're not talking about a bank robber. We're talking about somebody who's not what you call like different people at different levels. I don't think it's that degree. If somebody has a history of crime, then yes. She's not a criminal. She's just a little manipulative, which most women are to some degree. They're somewhere on the chart. She's just very more manipulative than average. But that's so I don't think so. But you should know that he doesn't even have to tell him that, because he doesn't even have to tell him because he didn't call him. Somebody calls me for reference. If I say, you want to tell me about the girl, the guy can say to me, no, I'm not the shadchan. I didn't get involved. You have no obligation. You called me for character reference. That's all. Okay. All right. Well, I have to stop early. I have to go do a pity. We'll continue tomorrow, Mitzvah.